There's something uniquely vulnerable about childhood. A time when the boundary between imagination and reality hasn't quite solidified yet. When the shadows in the corner of your room could be anything. When every creak becomes a footstep. Parents tell us these fears are normal, that every child is afraid of the dark, that monsters aren't real. And usually they're right. Usually those fears fade with the morning light. But what happens when the fear doesn't fade? What happens when a child's bedroom becomes something more than just a place where nightmares visit? Tonight, I want to tell you about a room. Just an ordinary child's bedroom in a suburban home in Pennsylvania. But for the family who lived there, this room became the center of a mystery that would challenge everything they thought they knew about their home, their daughter, and the nature of the spaces we trust most. The family moved into the house in the spring of 2009. We'll call them the Mitchells. David and Sarah Mitchell had just welcomed their second child, and their growing family needed more space. The house was perfect. Built in the 1980s, well-maintained, in a quiet neighborhood where kids rode bikes and neighbors waved from their porches. The kind of place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. Their daughter Emma was 6 years old when they moved in. She was a bright, imaginative kid who loved drawing and telling elaborate stories. She'd always been a good sleeper. Her new room was on the second floor. Emma wanted lavender walls, soft like twilight. They spent a weekend painting together. They furnished it with white furniture, a bed with a tall headboard, a dresser, a small desk. Sarah spent days making it perfect. New curtains with silver stars, a cozy reading nook in the corner, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling arranged in actual constellation patterns. It was everything a little girl could want. For the first month, everything was normal. Emma loved her new room. She would play in there for hours. At night, she would settle into bed easily. But then something changed. It started with Emma refusing to sleep alone. She would make it until bedtime without complaint. Sarah would read her a story, tuck her in, turn on the nightlight. Emma would seem fine. But the moment the lights went out and her parents left, she would appear at their bedroom door within minutes. She wasn't crying or panicking. She would just stand there in her pajamas and say quietly, "I don't want to sleep in there." When they asked why, she couldn't explain it. She would just say that the room felt different at night, that it didn't feel like her room anymore, like it belonged to someone else after dark. David and Sarah did what any parents would do. They checked for monsters under the bed and in the closet. They left the nightlight on. They tried leaving her door wide open. Nothing worked. Eventually, exhausted, they set up a sleeping bag in their bedroom, and Emma began sleeping on their floor. They told themselves it was just a phase. They were certain she would grow out of it. But then Sarah started to notice something else. During the day, when Emma was at school, Sarah would go into her daughter's room to tidy up. And she started to feel it too. A distinct sense of unease. The room felt heavier somehow. Colder, even though the thermostat showed it was the same temperature. Sarah found herself hurrying through her tasks, eager to leave. She would feel a prickling on the back of her neck, that primitive sensation of being watched. More than once, she spun around quickly, certain she'd catch someone behind her. But the room was always empty. She didn't mention it to David. She told herself Emma's fears were getting into her head. Then came the night that changed everything. David had stayed late at work, and Sarah was home alone with both kids. Emma was asleep on the floor of the master bedroom when Sarah heard it. A sound coming from upstairs. From Emma's room. A soft, rhythmic thumping, like something bouncing. Bounce, 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 steady and deliberate. Sarah's first thought was that Emma had woken up and gone to her room. But when she checked, Emma was sound asleep. Her small body curled in the sleeping bag. The sound continued. Bounce, bounce, bounce. Coming from Emma's closed door at the end of the hall. Sarah's heart pounded as she walked down the hallway. She told herself it was nothing. Maybe something had fallen. But she knew what she was hearing. It was a ball bouncing, clear and unmistakable. She pushed open the door, her hand trembling on the doorknob. The sound stopped instantly. The room was empty, completely still. Nothing was moving. Nothing was out of place. but Sarah knew what she'd heard. She stood in the doorway, listening to the silence. The room felt like it was holding its breath. 3 nights later, David had his own experience. He'd gotten up around 2 in the morning to check on the baby. Passing by Emma's room, he saw a light coming from under the door. A flickering, moving light, like someone was inside with a flashlight. He opened the door to check, already forming the words to ask Emma what she was doing up. The room was dark. Completely dark. No light at all. David stood there, staring into the darkness. He flipped on the overhead light. The room looked exactly as it should. Empty. When he went back to his bedroom, Emma was still sound asleep on the floor, exactly where she'd been. She hadn't moved. The incidents began to escalate. Sarah started hearing footsteps in Emma's room during the day, soft footsteps like a child walking around. She would be downstairs and hear them above her, coming from the ceiling. When she went up to investigate, the room was always empty. Objects began to move. A stuffed animal that had been on the bed would be on the floor. Books that were stacked neatly would be scattered. The closet door would be standing open when Sarah was certain she'd closed it. David started documenting everything. He was an engineer by training, and he wanted evidence. He set up a baby monitor with a camera in Emma's room, the kind with night vision and motion detection. For the first few nights, nothing appeared on the footage. But on the 4th night, at exactly 3:47 in the morning, the camera picked up something that made them both feel sick with fear. The rocking chair in the corner began to rock. Back and forth, slowly and steadily, as if someone was sitting in it. The movement continued for almost 3 minutes before it gradually came to a stop. David and Sarah watched the footage together. They watched it 3 times, neither speaking. There was no draft that could explain it. The window was closed. And rocking chairs don't just move on their own for 3 full minutes. If you're finding this story as unsettling as I am, you're exactly the kind of person who belongs here at Whispers Beyond. We dive deep into stories like this, stories that don't have easy answers. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. Emma had become adamant that she would never sleep in that room again. She wouldn't even go in to get her clothes in the morning. When pressed for details, she finally opened up. She said that when she was alone in her room at night, she could feel someone watching her, not just the general sense of being watched, but the specific feeling of eyes on her. She said she would see movement in the shadows, shapes that shifted when she tried to look directly at them. And sometimes, she said, she would hear whispering. Soft voices that she couldn't quite make out, like someone was speaking just below the level where she could understand the words. The whispers would stop the moment she turned on a light or called for her parents. Sarah felt cold listening to her daughter, because Emma's description matched exactly what Sarah had been feeling in that room. Sarah and David decided to swap rooms with Emma. They would take the bedroom at the end of the hall, and Emma would move into the master. If there was something wrong with that room, they would deal with it as adults. The move happened on a Saturday. For the first week, it seemed to work. Emma slept soundly, but Sarah and David began to understand exactly what their daughter had been experiencing. The room felt wrong. The moment they turned off the lights, the atmosphere changed. It became heavier. The shadows seemed darker than they should be. On the 3rd night, David heard the whispering, soft and indistinct, coming from near the closet. He woke Sarah and they both lay there listening. Voices, definitely voices, though neither could make out words. On the 8th night, Sarah woke up at 3 in the morning to a sound she would never forget. It was a child's laughter, clear and bright, coming from somewhere inside the room with them. The laughter seemed to move around the room, circling them. It wasn't Emma's laugh. This was different. Lighter. With an echo to it that made it sound not quite real. David shot up and turned on every light. The laughter stopped the moment the room filled with light, and in that moment they realized something terrifying. Whatever was in that room, it wasn't tied to the physical space. It had attached itself to that part of the house. They made a decision. They would seal off that room. David installed a heavy lock on the outside of the door. For 2 months, the room stayed closed and things were quiet. They began to wonder if maybe the entity had simply moved on, but they were wrong. David was awakened one night by the distinct click of a doorknob turning. He went upstairs. The door to the sealed room was standing wide open. The lock was still engaged, but the door had opened from the inside. And from within that dark room he could hear it. The bouncing ball. Bounce. 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 David pulled the door closed. He installed a deadbolt the next day. But 3 nights later, Sarah found the door standing open again. The deadbolt was still locked. The keys were in David's pocket, but the door was open. And this time, there was something new. On the floor of the empty room, there was a drawing. A child's drawing done in crayon. It showed a house with windows and a door. And in one of the upstairs windows, there was a figure. A small figure with long dark hair, waving. Neither Sarah nor David had drawn it. Emma swore she hadn't been in that room. But the drawing was there. Fresh. Someone or something had created it and left it there like a message. Sarah contacted a paranormal investigation team. They spent the entire night investigating. The team was led by a woman named Patricia who'd been investigating paranormal activity for 20 years. They came with equipment, EMF meters, digital recorders, infrared cameras. In the morning, Patricia called them with her findings: temperature fluctuations, EMF spikes, and most disturbing, voices on their audio recordings. Sarah and David went to listen to the recordings. Most of it was static. But there were voices. Faint, but definitely there. And one phrase came through clearly. My room. 2 words spoken by what sounded like a child's voice. Young. The voice had a strange quality to it, like it was coming from somewhere far away. The team told the Mitchells that what they were dealing with was an intelligent haunting, something that was aware of them, something that reacted to their presence. Patricia suggested it might be the spirit of a child. But the house had no tragic history. No children had died there. Sometimes, Patricia said, we simply don't know why a place becomes haunted. The Mitchells decided to move. They put the house on the market and moved in with Sarah's parents. It took 8 months, but eventually a young couple bought the house. First-time buyers who loved the neighborhood and had plans to start a family. David thought about warning them. He rehearsed the conversation in his head 100 times. But he didn't. He told himself that maybe it wouldn't happen to them. He knew it was cowardly. But he was desperate to be free of that place. I've thought a lot about this story since Sarah shared it with me. The question that haunts me most is that drawing. That simple crayon picture of a house with a figure in the window waving. Was it a message? A plea? Or was it something darker? The Mitchells never found out what happened to the couple who bought their house. They never looked back. Sarah said she can't bring herself to drive past that neighborhood. She takes the long way. Always. But sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet and her family is asleep, Sarah still hears it. The sound of a ball bouncing. Bounce, bounce, bounce. She knows it's not real. Knows it's just in her head. A phantom echo of those months of fear. But she hears it all the same. And sometimes she wakes up in a cold sweat, convinced she heard a child laughing somewhere in the hallway. And she knows that somewhere in her memory, in that sealed room of her mind, that presence is still there. Still waiting, still watching. The drawing with its waving figure, the voice saying, my room, with such certainty, such ownership. And that, perhaps, is the real horror. Not just that our homes can be haunted, but that once we've experienced something like this, we can never truly leave it behind. It becomes part of us. A shadow that follows us from house to house, room to room. A door in our mind that never quite locks properly. The ghost we carry with us is not the one that haunted the room. It's the memory of our own helplessness. The knowledge that there are things in this world that we cannot control, cannot explain, and cannot escape. The understanding that the places we trust most, the rooms where our children sleep, can become something else entirely when the lights go out. If this story has stayed with you the way it stayed with me, I hope you'll subscribe to Whispers Beyond. We're building a community of people who understand that reality has thin places, strange corners where the rules don't quite apply. Sleep well tonight. And if you hear something in the dark, something that shouldn't be there, remember that sometimes it's just the house settling. But sometimes it's something else entirely.